give yourself a shout out real quick. Tell us, like, who you are, what you do, what are your pronouns, how do you identify?
So I am Keagan Anfuso. I am a freelance filmmaker / content creator.
Kind of being a boss.
I don't know about all that, but...
Kind of sounds like it, though. Welcome to I Like You.
Oh, yeah.
Content Presents. We didn't do
we're here
an
doing
intro.
a thing.
That was
We're
very
really good at this.
That was very my favorite murdery. Like, just halfway through the episode, you're just like, by the way.
It's an OA intro. Halfway through the show, welcome to what you're watching. This is what you're watching. I Like You. Queer Content Presents. All right, Nina. Keagan. Nice to see you.
We're doing like a queer thing, interviewing queer people. Some people identify as queer, some people don't. But what is like your definition of queer, and do you identify with that term in any way?
I totally do. I actually think as I get older, I more identify in the queer area. And I would even say like queer female, like queer woman, mm-hmm. right? Because I think that queer is like such a big term, like it's meant a lot of different things along the way. Mm-hmm. But for me, I love the word queer because it just in its own essence feels non-binary to me. It feels like, when I think queer, I think strange. I love the idea of being like an attractively strange person, mm-hmm. right? Like not strange in like a criticism, but I like strange things. I like odd mm-hmm. things. I like different things. I like unique things. Mm-hmm. And I've always felt like the word queer was its own unique kind of descriptor, right? And I liked that. And I liked that you could be queer and you could be a lesbian, you could be trans, you could be binary and still be kind of queer in something that you do or that you support or that, and I liked that. Mm-hmm. Some people didn't, well, and I can understand why, but a lot of people didn't like the way that it was so blanketed and it included so much. They wanted it to be more specific. Mm-hmm. And I felt otherwise. I like the idea of being, being under the realm of queer. It's probably my favorite identifier, if any.
I feel like it gives you more flexibility because there's such a broad spectrum of what is queer. Like, you can make queer your own that way.
And I know, and I get it, arguments on both sides, arguments coming from 15 million sides, totally get it, mm-hmm. respect everybody else's opinions, but I'm all about, like, the shift from LGBTQIA, like, I'm all about the shift to queer. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, I'm all about it. And the reason, though, to be specific for me, is because I do agree that we need to include, all of these different identities, and to do that, like, we literally would have to use the whole alphabet at some point, right? And we can't, it's just not realistic to me that we'd be able to do that. We're always going to be leaving someone out, or some group out, mm-hmm. and I just don't like that. And I think that with the word queer, if you can find comfort there, it can cover a lot of those, communities, or a lot of those identities, or a lot of those individualities. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I'm very pro that.
Keagan, when did you first come out?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of like I'm kind of like a left field coming out story, because I didn't really. My appearance kind of came out for me. It kind of told on me before I said anything. There were moments where things happened and I was okay with them, and that was more, I didn't go through any kind of like, what am I, and am I okay with this, like, in a sense of like vulnerability and transparency. Like, when I have a very interesting, queer, strange, whatever, family dynamic. Inside my family, inside that dynamic, lots of divorce, I was adopted, and then there was lots of divorce, so it was kind of strange, but very Southern. In the way that, mm-hmm. like, I had, like, uncle, brothers, and aunt, sisters, and, like, all this kind of thing. And I say all that just to say, like, so I had this, like, really interesting family dynamic, and I had my older brother, who's actually technically my uncle, and I say that just to point out, like, the age gap, right? Mm-hmm. He actually came out when I was super young. I was probably about 8 or 9, and it was not good. So he was a police officer. He was in law enforcement, and he was just so stressed about what was going to happen, if they found out. And I guess they did start to find out, and I don't know, I don't remember all the specific details, but I know that he was super, super depressed, and the reason that he finally was sitting down and telling my family is because he was suicidal. Oh, wow. And so that was my first, like, listening through the crack in the door to him coming out and like listening to my family trying to understand what was going on with him and listening to their reactions, that was my very first experience and exposure to someone being gay. Like, I lived in a really small town. I lived in a southern town. I lived in Palaca, Florida. There were no gay people, like, it was the 90s, it was the early 90s, you know, there were no gay people, like, running around fluent, like, out, like, you know, there weren't gay people on TV. Because to me, like, I saw that, I remember thinking, kind of, so what? It just made sense to me in a way that I guess I'm lucky that I thought that way.
Mm-hmm.
I've spoken to you before. I think a little bit I felt the same way about like racism and prejudice. Like, I unfortunately grew up in a really prejudiced household because my father, not my mother, but my father was like, unfortunately, like a really, really prejudiced man, and he worked in law enforcement. Hearing him say things, it just never made sense to me. Like, I knew something was wrong about the way that he was talking, even though I was being raised in an environment that was trying to tell me this is how you should feel. And so I remember, like, after my brother comes out, in my brain, like, oh wow, this bad thing, you know, happened, and, you know, we should still love him and be there for him and care for him, and obviously, like, my family is gonna, like, in my brain I was like, well, obviously my family's gonna be, you know, supportive and fine with him.
How old were you at this point?
I was probably like 8 or 9 when he came out. And then I remember, like, Jerry Springer was like all the rage, right, when I was a kid.
Of course.
So I was watching Jerry Springer, and these two women on the show, like, you know, just started making out. This is after my brother came out, you know, and I'm sitting in the living room on the floor, and I'm watching Jerry Springer, and these two women started making out on the TV, and, like, my mom, I know this is gonna get weird, but my mom and, like, my biological mom, because I stayed in the same family, so my mom, my biological mom, and, like, 2 of my aunt/sisters, like, they ran into the living room, and, like, they were all, like, scrambling to turn it off.
Really?
And they were like, you can't watch this shit, look at this shit that's all over this TV, like, this shouldn't be on here. Like, they freaked out.
Wow. Did they explain to you why? Or
No,
you
they just freaked out. And I remember being like, what? Like, what? You know?
Turn
like,
Springer back on.
Yeah, what? To me, it was like, what even just happened? Like,
yeah.
why? You know, and the thing is that, like, my older brother, he was sitting there. Like, he was in that room, you know? And I don't even know, we've never talked about it, but I don't even know if he remembers that. But, like, I remember that for the rest of my life. Like, I'm looking at him and watching them react, and it's like...
And this was after he came out.
Yeah, this is after he came out. I don't know, I feel like I think about that a lot as an adult. Like, how did he feel sitting there? Did he feel anything at all? Like,
what did you feel from that?
I mean, I was so confused. But not because I'm sitting there thinking, like, I'm gay, like, does that mean they hate me? Like, it wasn't like that. It was just...
You weren't even thinking about your own sexual orientation.
No, like, why was that a big deal? I don't know. I guess I wasn't looking at it and thinking, like, oh, I want to do that when I get older. You know, if anything, turn off the TV because you shouldn't have an 8-year-old watching, or 9-year-old watching Jerry Springer. But don't turn it off because there's lesbians.
Yeah,
you know, there's so much going on that show. But
did you ever use any, like, identifiers like lesbian, or like
when I was a kid?
When you figured out that your sexual orientation was not heterosexual?
No, not really. Like, well, not at first.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I remember, obviously, like, I remember my first girlfriend. But again, it wasn't like, oh, I met this girl and, like, I feel these things that I've never felt before. Like, it wasn't like that. It was, again, it's the early 90s. So you're watching TV. I was always, like, kind of like a big reader, and I loved reading and I loved TV, right? And you never saw gay characters on television. So some shows I would watch, and, you know, Boy Meets World. I can think about Boy Meets World, right? I loved Sean in Boy Meets World, and it was a weird kind of...
I did too. I associate
Didn't we all?
Yeah, more
right?
with Sean.
Okay, and it was weird. It was like I kind of want to look like him, but I also kind of think he's really attractive, but I also kind of, like, wish I could dress like him and have that hair. You know, he had great hair. But then some other shows I would watch, which is totally, like, I don't know if either one of you are going to remember this, but, like, Nickelodeon had this show called Hey Dude. Okay, Melody on Hey Dude. Loved Melody. Like, she'd come, like, riding in on the horse, and I was like, yeah, whatever, like, put me on that horse, you know what I mean? I don't know, I liked watching Melody, but I also liked watching Sean, and, like, I didn't really know...
But you weren't, like, connecting it to a
sexual
orientation.
I wasn't like, I want to have sex with these people. I just was, you know, I was just drawn to them. When I was in middle school, in 8th grade, I met, like, the first girl that, like, kind of reacted to me in a way that was, like, flirty, and, you know, and it wasn't like a thought. It wasn't like, oh, I can't do this. Like, this is not, it literally, I reacted to it the same way that I reacted to, like, when guys in my life or boys in my life, you know, were being flirty or whatever. Actually, like, after school one day, I was hanging out with her, like, in the way that you hang out after school, like, on some bleachers while your parents are gonna come pick you up, you know?
Yeah.
Like, we were on, like, that kind of date. She kissed me, and I feel like, it was not, like, you know, some people are just like, oh my god, the whole world, like, opened up and everything made sense.
Yeah.
I was, no, it was the same, like, it was just it felt normal. It felt like nothing. It felt like no big deal, right?
Yeah.
It was just like, okay, that was cool that it happened. Like, I'm into that. I could keep doing that, you know? My aunt and my mom were picking me up at the same time, and they saw it.
Oh, no.
Oh, wow.
And they, like, you know, the second I got in the car, they were like, you're not coming back to this school next year. We're moving, like, they literally, like, we packed up our house,
What?
and
They
my
moved
mom
because
was
of that?
my mom was wanting to move already, but it was like, were we gonna live on the west side, or we were living on the west side? Were we gonna live on the west side or somewhere else? And, like, they were like, we're gonna move, like, you're going to a different high school. Like, everything was so like, we're shutting this shit down. They didn't say, like, you can't be gay. That wasn't what was said. It was, you are too young for this, for, like, any of this. But which didn't make sense because I'd had a boyfriend.
Yeah,
And, like, I wasn't too young for that, you know? Like, I wasn't too young for the boyfriend, but I was way too young to have a girlfriend.
Do you think they were relating, like, lesbian relationships to, like, pornographic in some way? What do you think the difference
I
was?
feel like, if I was really gonna, like, analyze it and talk about it, I think that I don't want to say that I had, like, a simple family. Like, they're smart people, you know, are accomplished in their own lives, you know, they're not, like, backwoods, simplistic, like, uneducated, like, they're not like that. But I think that they just had never dealt with or been exposed to this kind of thing. I think they didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And in their minds, this was, like on average, the way that we think it's natural for a young girl to have a boyfriend or to be drawn to boys. Like, I don't mean we as in we, but, like, in societal sense, like, parents are like, oh, of course, I have a young girl, she's going to be attracted to boys, that's something we need to watch out for. They're prepared for that. And they expect it, and they think that's natural. And I think that sometimes the reaction where it's like, oh, you might be gay, like, oh, you're too young to, like, know any of that, it's because they think that it's some complicated thing that you need to be at some sort of maturity level to truly understand and know about yourself. It shouldn't be any more complicated or require any more maturity than being attracted to a boy if you're a young girl, you know, or if you're a boy and you're attracted to young girls, that should, you know, it's just, it all happens at about the same time.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, people are, like, setting up their toddlers with, like, oh, that's your little boyfriend, that's your little girlfriend. But, like, you're, you know, in middle school and you're not at the maturity level to understand having a connection with another human.
And I think it has a lot to do with, like, a parental unit or a family, like, not feeling prepared themselves.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, like, their go-to. It's like, I don't know, I wasn't prepared for this. Like, this is a curveball.
If I'm not, you can't be.
Yeah. And something that I've been really trying to bring to the table when we're talking about doing, like, panel discussions or queer content, specifically in regard to when we're talking to, like, parents about their kids, or we're talking about, like, young kids who maybe, like, their parents aren't being as present, you know? We need to be talking so much more about, like, safe sex, because it's not talked about enough. And I think a lot of parents, and I know that mine did this, and I know, like, it's not because my mom was, like, a bad parent. Like, sure, like, we can all say, like, there were things that, like, our parents were neglectful on. My mom and I had, like, a really rough relationship when I was a kid, but I was adopted by my grandmother, and she was older, she was from a different generation, like, not knowing what to do with your, like, especially I have kids in my life now, so, like, not knowing what to do with your kid is such a helpless feeling, and we love to, as the children of our parents, we love to be like, well, this is, you know, you should have done this, and you should have done this, and, like, you needed to be this. We make it sound so simple, and I'm like, I am front row in the conversation about how it's not. So, like,
no, it's not.
You find yourself tripping over things that you yourself would have thought were just, like, so simple, because they throw things at you in a way that is just so complicated. It is complicated, and it freezes you up. And you know, as a parent, when you're looking down at kids and you especially your kids, you don't know what to say and you don't know what to do, like, there is a panic that happens. It is a panic. Like, you are in charge. You are responsible for this person's life and well-being. And, like, like, what? Oh, my God. Like, I really don't want to pick this kid up, you know?
Concerned about that.
And then there's another thing that happens where, like, you find yourself, like, sometimes you get angry. And you're angry at you for not knowing what to do. You're frustrated. You're flustered. But, like, it comes off like you're angry at the kid. And you try to think of things to just, like, kind of, like, put it off and get it away from you for a minute so that you can't think. And I think, you know, I definitely think that's what my mom was doing with me. Like, once the whole, like, oh, you're... okay, so you're gonna be with girls. I never said out loud, like, I'm definitely a lesbian and all I want to be with is women. After that first girlfriend, pretty weird dudes came in and out of my life, really weird dudes, and most of them ended up being pretty gay. It got to a point where, okay, women are definitely my preference. Like, that is where I prefer to be. But I started having sexual experiences with girls, like, I was like 13 and 14 years old. My mom... she didn't know what to do with that. She didn't know what to keep me from. You know, with boys it's easy. Like, no, you're not sleeping in a boy's house. You know, but when it comes to, like, you're a young girl, you're a teenager, you're now, like, a lesbian, like, what do I block you from all of your friends? Like, do I not let you have sleepovers? Do I not let people sleep over here? Do I not, you know, like, that's a complicated conversation, right? And I don't think that we talk about that enough, and I in no way, like, I'm not blaming my mom for, like, the decisions that I made, but when you don't have a parent or a guardian or a mentor in some capacity, like, in your life when you're that young and you're trying to kind of navigate all of that, you start making really adult decisions for yourself that you should not be making. Like, you just should not be making them. I definitely was not prepared to be having the experiences that I was having. Now, like, looking at the you know, our kids, I'm like, 13 years old? Absolutely not. 13? Like, no, nobody's coming in here. No, you're not going in nobody's house. Whose house? No.
How has your sexual orientation influenced your creative endeavors, or vice versa?
Ooh. You know, it's fun that you asked that question, because the biggest way that it's affected my work is everybody thinks that every project that I do is, like, by default gay. Right? Like, everything. Like, if I'm doing something that has nothing to do with, like, queer or gay culture, people are just, like, brain-broken. They're like, oh, what do you mean? Like, who's gay in that? Like, well, what... you know, is that business, like, gay-owned? Or, like, is that... And I'm like, what? Like, you know? The reason I say it's funny for me to answer it right now is because of the film that I'm making. One of my biggest goals with the film that I'm making is that it, at the end... right now, I understand, like, it's doing it a lot of benefit for people to be thinking that it is a queer film, because that means they'll see it and then they'll be surprised. It's affected my work in a sense of realizing how difficult it is to be queer and create content without it being assumed as just everything that comes out of you is gay. I avoided for a really long time identifying in any way professionally as, like, a queer filmmaker or a queer video. Only recently have I really felt like, you know what, I am fucking queer, and I am a queer filmmaker, and, like, I'm gonna be honest about that. And originally, the only reason that I would put that on anything, like, queer female filmmaker, the only reason I would put it on anything is because I wanted people to know that I was female before I got there. Or before, like, they worked with me. Because I got tired of answering the question. I wanted it to be so clear, like, that I was female before I started the work, right? And I also wanted it to say queer female filmmaker because that would stop me from working with someone who wasn't okay with working with a queer person. But unfortunately, what it caused by doing that is people thinking I only wanted to do queer-related media or queer-related work, right? And I don't live in a place where there's so much queer content and media really that I can survive off that, right? So that has definitely been present. The second thing that I would say, how has it affected, you know, my work in the sense of the film, it has introduced me to a lot of inter-community oppression and a lot of inter-community, like, rage. And most recently, leaving set, we were shooting over at the Metro. Older generation lesbian, like, stops me and she's like, hey, heard you're making a film about being, you know, a masculine, you know, lesbian woman and, like, what that's like. And, you know, I corrected her. I was like, actually, you know, like, it's not about being a masculine lesbian. Like, it's just about masculinity in women, whatever. We sit down, we start talking. She told me the most heartbreaking stuff about growing up being terrified to, like, go outside just because she was obvious, right? Being terrified to go outside, not getting jobs, having to, you know, worry about people coming into her house trying to kill her. All these decades, and she's saying it was like this in the 50s, it was like this in the 60s, it was like this in the 70s, and, you know, we were terrified. We were so afraid. We were threatened all the time. I watched my friends die. You know, I felt like I was any day going to die. Somebody was going to kill me not because she was out holding hands with a woman in the street, but just because even in her own, like, confined area of the world, in her own house, she wasn't safe because they just knew, you know, that she was gay. Wow. And then she said, you know, thank you so much for making a film that talks about anything like this, because I thought that nobody was going to really talk about masculine lesbian women. I thought we'd passed that. I thought that was never going to be addressed and that nobody would ever be really talking about it. You know, this is what she said. She said she felt like every time she sees this stuff out there and content about it, like what's going on with other communities, what's going on with, like, you know, other identities, other walks of life, whatever, she's just being constantly told that what they're doing is, you know, what they're experiencing is worse than what she experienced. And she's like, you know, for people to be telling me now that because I'm white and gay, that my experience was actually privileged. She's like, you know, what am I supposed to do with that? You know, how am I supposed to feel about that when this is my story? And all I could think about, like, leaving was just like, man, we are going in the wrong direction if somebody who experienced that feels like that, right? Like, if that is what she is getting, if that is what's coming through, if that's what our community and all of, you know, their efforts, if that's the message that's actually coming through, like, we are doing something wrong. And so I don't know how much more, you know, queer specific content I'm going to go on and create, but for me, as, like, in a filmmaker perspective, it just told me, like, we need to be creating in a different way. We need to be telling stories in a different way, or we need to be achieving our own, you know, just, like, achieving our own activism in a way that doesn't, like, push down people like her, or make her feel like the things that happen to her are not important anymore. Like, that's just craziness. You know,
I think we talk a little bit about the idea of intersectionality a little bit, and it was kind of like a term that got really highlighted for a minute, but now is kind of pushed back in favor of these very specific terms. And I think that for what you're talking about, I think that we do need to put a lens on the fact that privilege is an intersectional thing. You can be, you know, somebody who came from a really wealthy background, but now you're in college working 3 jobs and your parents aren't paying for shit. Or, you know, you can be somebody who is from intergenerational non-wealth based off of systemic issues that have to do with your race. But your parents won the lottery or something, and now you're going to college, not having any debt. Like, there are just so many ways in which those things cross, and they can affect everyone's experience so individually and differently, and we have to honor that.
No matter what I'm creating or who I'm creating for, I really want to be telling the truth through all the things that I create.
What are,
I'm lying about everything.
For you,
yes,
the 2 most dangerous emotions?
Is sadness, for sure. Like, I have sadness and guilt, right? And I feel like when I'm in those spaces, like when I'm feeling extreme amounts of guilt and extreme amounts of sadness, I make really bad decisions.
Will you share with us what you called genitalia growing up, or what your parents taught you?
The only thing that I can ever remember it being called was a monkey.
No.
Yeah, by my
For both
aunt.
you and your brother?
No.
Just the vagina was the monkey.
Yeah. Vaginas were monkeys. And I had one great aunt that would call it that. I don't remember it being referred to by any other member of my family ever. I just remember that.
Interesting.
Shannon's thing is peeps. Peeps. Yeah, that's what she has our kids calling it the peeps.
So
But it's unisex. It's like for everything. Like you should never be seeing people's peeps. Like
that's what, I was dating a person for a minute and they called their genitalia a peep.
Really?
Yeah.
This is a thing?
And as an adult,
I thought it was like totally made up by my girlfriend and like her. Well, I think her mom also.
I think
used
of the
it
little marshmallow chicks.
Me too.
Yeah,
That's the first thing I was like.
And I don't really like
which kind of looks like. I mean, their beak kind of looks like clit-like.
I know. I was thinking that too. And if you like bend it in half from the bottom.
I had a friend once that said they referred to it as the downstairs mix-up. I don't know, I'm kind of like a really literal person. Like, I like things to be literally referred to as what they are.
So
I was
you say
never...
vagina and penis?
Yeah. Like,
same. That's how
call it what it is.
So even
know?
in bed, you'd say vagina?
No, I don't say anything in bed.
No. You just sleep. You sleep in bed.
No. So I'll say that, like when you, like, dangerous, like, I don't talk about sex. Like, okay. I don't have,
well,
like...
Is it because you have no really boring?
No, you can try, but I'm just saying, like, in my off time, like, at home, like, I'm just not, I don't talk about sex. I'm not, like, into talking about sex. Like...
Is this just not, like, a synapse that just was not developed, or what is your theory on that?
I don't know what it is.
Some
like,
just
I say that, I'm
just curious what your theory on why.
Because I'm like obviously like a big psychology fanatic, you know, I think a lot of people know that about me, but it's funny because I'll sit there and say things like, oh, I have no idea where that came from, and then I'll be like, well, my parents had separate bedrooms, and I never saw them be affectionate, like, growing up, and, you know, obviously, like, I grew up around, like, zero other, you know, gay people, lesbian people, or, like, whatever, and there was no, like, talk.
About genitalia.
I wish I could remember the name of this book.
What?
It was, like, a pink cover, it had, like, a weird flower on the front.
Margaret?
No, it was, like, super scientific. It was, like... the female anatomy and its sexual organ whatever. Like, it was, like, super technical. And so I was reading through, and it was, like, diagrams and, like, science and, like, what is sex and, like, what is vagina and, like, what is penis. And
you're like, this is boring. Who does this?
No. I was obsessed with it.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with it to the point that, like, I don't know, like, I was a big reader, so I read everything. But, like, I was obsessed with, like, this very technical conversation about, like, sex and body and it answered every question that I could have possibly had in, like, a very non-emotional way. And I like information presented to me in a non-emotional way, right? Very comfortable. Like, I was totally comfortable reading this book.
So did that inform, like, what you thought sex was before you had sex?
I mean, possibly. I remember getting in a shit ton of trouble, though, because, like, I had a friend that came over, and we were like, I was like, oh, let me read you, like, some cool stuff from this book. And I, like, opened up this book, and I'm like, so the penis inserted into the vagina, like, blah, and my mom, like, flings open the door, she's like, what are you doing?
You gave this to me.
Yeah, it's a book. Like, I thought
this was for, you know,
why would you give it to me if I wasn't allowed to, like, tell other children about it, you know?
You should have said something like that.
So you're getting ready to have sex for the first time. Think about to your first time having sex. You had no thoughts about what it was going to be like or fears.
No, like, I remember accidentally ending up on Skinamax. Like, you remember Skinamax?
Yeah.
We all did, right?
Yeah.
So I remember accidentally ending up on Skinamax. And that was the first time that I saw, like, people having sex. And I was like, they look like animals. Like, this is, like, what are they doing, right? Yeah. And I think I kind of was, like, in that mindset for a long time. Mm-hmm. I might still be in that mindset,
like, that is just
a little
primal,
bit.
And I'm not maybe interested.
It's just I know that this sounds, like, crazy to most people. I talk about it in therapy just so everybody knows, like, I'm a work in progress. But
same.
I still, like, to an extent, the times, first of all, like, I have a lot of deep regret for the way that I, like, threw around sex for, like, the first, like, you know, first half of my 20s, like, really, right? And, I mean, sure, like, in therapy, like, I spent a long time trying to figure out, like, what was going on, and, like, ultimately, for me, like, again, this is me personally, like, no shame to anybody who loves sex and wants to be having sex all the time, like, party hard, like, do your thing.
Be safe, but...
Please be safe, get consent. Consent. Including lesbian, gay relationships, like gay men, whatever, like consent, important all the way across the board.
And regular testing.
Sorry. And it's super easy. I walked onto a AIDS truck thinking it was a taco truck one night drunk. Walked out, realized I didn't have AIDS. Like, that's how easy it is to get tested.
Go to Jasmine, they test every day of the week.
Or hop into a taco truck and realize,
hop into a taco HIV
No, please don't
Not all taco trucks check that.
Important note, you're right. Please don't go to a Tijuana Flats asking for, so, anyway, we were talking about, so I think what I realized about me that was just very personal to me is one of the reasons that I was able to just kind of have random sexual conversations. Like, you remember, it was all the rage on the internet to be in, like, chat rooms and stuff. And I remember, like, as a young kid, like, I would go in these chat rooms and have these, like, weird chats with people because I wanted to know what it was about. It was, like, research for me. And it was, I'd be having these conversations, and I remember, like, I don't know what to say to this person. Like, let me look over here and, like, see what this person said and copy and paste. Like, just to see, like, what people... And then I remember, like, sitting and thinking, like, people are really, like, they get off on this kind of thing. Like, people are enjoying this. This is a weird culture. And then in my actual life, like, starting to kind of, like, oh, okay, this is what this person wants from me. Like, my first sexual experience. Okay, so this is what this person wants from me. This is weird. Like, why do people like doing this? Like, it feels like nothing, you know? And I had boyfriends when I was younger, and they would obviously, like, you know, want to make out all the time, and it's like, I don't know why, like, you don't, like, what, it was so interesting to me, like, what are people getting from this that I'm not getting? Like, why do people care so much about this? Why do people want to be doing this all the time? And then it was almost like an investigation through my life of, like, okay, well, first of all, you know, high school being what it was, like, I was treated very bad. You know, people for the most part, like, they did not like me. I definitely wasn't considered attractive. Like, not, I don't know, I guess not in the sense that I wanted to be or anything like that. You know, like, I had friends, like, a small amount of friends, you know, and, you know, some people were nice to me, but, like, being considered, like, an attractive person, that was not, like, that just wasn't happening in high school. It was weird. I was, you know, different.
Is that something you wanted for yourself, or you just weren't engaged in wanting that?
I think a combination of, like, the people around me growing up saying people are not going to think you're attractive if you dress like this and look like this. And like, then,
oh, this is what they meant.
Right. And then so getting high school, and I was like, well, of course you don't think I'm attractive because, like, this is what I look like, you know?
Was gonna happen.
Whatever. And so graduating high school and then getting around queer people, and then suddenly people in that community finding me attractive was like, what? You know? Like, and in response to that, I mean, I try to tell people all the time, like, yes, I'm queer, yes, I'm masculine presenting, right? I was still a teenage girl, right? And teenage girls still have, like, they try to, like, you know, that you want people to think that you're attractive. You want people to want to spend time with you. You want to have friends. You want to have close relationships. Like, you want, like, all the things that come with being a teenage girl. Like, I still had all of that.
Fucking human.
And being human, you know? Like,
we all want to be
I'm just saying, like, you know, teenage girls have
a
reputation for being very dramatic and, like,
sure.
wanting a lot of attention and all those kind of things. And I think, like, I definitely, like, fit that stereotype to an extent. Because as soon as, like, you know, if you take a human being and, like, don't give them attention for, you know, X amount of years, and then suddenly, like, they're getting attention, like, that's going to be a whole new world to them, right? And that's kind of what I felt like, and people started finding me attractive, and it was, like you were mentioning earlier, like, oh, okay, you are giving me this compliment of saying that I'm attractive, like, okay, so I'm going to give you, you know, thank you for being nice to me, I'm going to give you what you want, you know?
The reason why you're telling me I am attractive.
But never in my life was I, like, seeking sex, or did I meet somebody and think, like, I really want to have sex with this person. It's just, I tried really, really hard for a really long time. If I'm going to have sex, I want it to be with a woman, right? Like, I definitely know it isn't, like, I don't want anything to do with sex with men. I placed myself, and again, when I'm talking about, like, we need to be having conversations about this with people, because, like, I definitely placed myself in some dangerous situations trying to figure out, like, am I really gay? It was almost like the backwards of, like, coming out, like, am I operating as gay because, like, everybody assumed this about me and I just kind of, like, went in that direction? Like, is that why I'm not feeling what I'm supposed to feel? Like, because I'm not really gay? You know, like, there was that whole confusion that I went through. Hard no. Hard stop. Like, okay, this is definitely not for me. And then, like, that's the feeling of, like, just absolute, like, out-of-body experience. I never, ever, ever want to feel this way again. I you know, just trying to figure out, then it was kind of, well, what is wrong with me? You know, what's going on with me? Like, why do I not care? And so many people in my life were like, you haven't found the right person. You're not having the right kind of sex. You're not, you know,
you're doing it wrong.
It must be, yes, like, all of it was like, you're not, and then being in relationships where it was taken so personal. Like, people would get into, you know, several relationships, they would get involved with me, and I would try to be transparent and honest about, like, this is something that I'm really not, you know, I don't know, I'm not that great at, you know, like, I'm not good at, like, a consistent sexual relationship. It's, like, very few and far between that I'll want to, like, engage in that kind of thing, or, you know, interact in that way. And it was almost like seeing it as a challenge, like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, you're like that. I'll change that. You know, like, I'll
you
fix
haven't met
that.
the right
like,
girl yet.
You're right. Like, I'm gonna be the exception. And it's a lot of, like, why aren't you trying harder? Why aren't you doing this for me? Yeah. Or, it wasn't, okay, I just want you to have sex. It was, I want you to want to have sex now. You know, I want you to want that. I want you to want, nobody wants to have sex with somebody who doesn't want to have sex, right? Well, hope not, you know, like, you shouldn't be having sex with people who, you know, consent, but, and it's probably a reason that I feel so strongly about, like, getting consent from people and, not letting people pressure you, and because of me and, like, my own personal, like, experiences and my own personal circumstance and relationship with sex. Definitely a difficult thing to navigate when it comes to, like, being, like, having a sexual orientation where everything is almost always about sex. Yeah. It's like the kind of sex that you're having is why you're considered a part of that community. Yeah, like, you know what I mean? Like, saying, well, I'm mostly, like, I'm pretty heavy on the asexual spectrum. And saying that to people, and then their response being, so how do you have a relationship? Like, how do you, as if, like, honestly, like, as if there's nothing else in a relationship or that defines a relationship other than sex. And it's like, you know, well, some people, not unfortunately, but some people have things about them. They have things about their personality. Like, some people are naturally, like, depressed, unfortunately, right? And the way that we don't walk, you know, the way that it's awful to be in a relationship with a depressed person and tell them to smile more so that you can feel better, so that you can feel like they're happier in their relationship. Like, that's the same way that I feel when, you know, anybody that I was in a relationship was like, well, you could just have sex more. You know, do that so that I can be happy. And I mean, and also people get, like, super confused when I say that I'm also very monogamous. Right? Because their next thing is, like, okay, so then do you have an open relationship so that your girlfriend or your person can, like, get what they need? I guess it just, like, doesn't occur to people, like, a person could be happy and get what they need without having, like, a consistent sex life that's happening all of the time. Like, nothing prioritizes above that. Nothing. Most of us know about love languages and how everybody has, like, their different one, and when you find a really great relationship, like, you're able to understand, comprehend, translate, share each other's love languages. It doesn't necessarily, a good relationship doesn't necessarily mean that you have the same love language. Sex is only one part of a love language. To some people, their love language is sex. That's how they communicate love. That is their way of doing so. I would never work very well with somebody like that. I'm just not capable of communicating love in that way, right? Some people hear asexual and they think, oh, you never have sex. No, that's not true. I am interested in sex much less than your average person. I'm not driven by it. It's not a priority in my life. I am very monogamous with it. You know, in the times that I do want to, you know, be sexual, be affectionate, it is invested in one person.
So when you do want to have sex, what is the motivation for it?
Oh man, I don't know. It's completely random. Mm-hmm. It's not, like, it's almost like, I know it's a terrible comparison, but it's almost like being hungry, you know? It just occurs. Mm-hmm. It's like, you know, if I...
No matter how much craving?
No, no, not at all. Like, no matter how much I like the food, if I'm not hungry, I don't want it, and it's gonna feel terrible if I eat. You know what I mean? But if I'm hungry, then I only want to eat the food that I like, right? Mm-hmm. Like, right? If I do want to have sex, I want it to be with, like, that person that I love, that I'm in a relationship with, that I'm connected to, and that stays within my relationship. Mm-hmm. So when I say asexual spectrum, there are some people who it's just as individual as anything else. You know, there's some people who never want to have sex, but they like porn, you know? Mm-hmm. Because the actual act of sex isn't, they don't enjoy it. Mm-hmm. They enjoy watching other people have sex, and that works for them, and that's fine for them, and they like to have that, like, private experience all their own, and that's fine, like, whatever. There are people that like to have, you know, very few sexual encounters, and they, like, schedule them out, and they, like, time them out, and, like, and that's hard for some people. But they do that because that works for them. Yeah. Like, they like knowing it's gonna be on this day, and it's gonna be on this time, and it's coming, and it gives me time to, like, prepare for it mentally, and, like, you know.
And in that way, it can be enjoyable.
Right. It's so individual, and there's extremes. There's, like, okay, I don't really love sex, but it's okay. And that's an area of the spectrum. And then there's, like, every now and then I like to have sex, but it's pretty minimal. There's that, you know. And then there's, no, I never want to have sex with people. I have my own way of, you know. And there are literally people who live in existence where zero sex. Like, they do not need it. They do not want it. They don't want to be around it. They don't want to look at it. And
man,
you know,
I'd have so much more time in the day if that were my case. I'm kind of jealous of people like that. Like, I would be a more productive person.
It would save me like 20 hours a week.
I don't even want to calculate
20 hours honestly. A week. A lot people will say, what happened to you? Like, did you have, like, some kind of traumatic experience? No, I didn't. Like
this is a traumatic experience right
I'm
now.
sure you've had partners that say, like, when you figure out what is wrong with you, you'll be able to figure out how to...
That is traumatic. Yes.
That is traumatic.
So traumatic for me along this process has been people who know that I am this way and push sex on me instead in an attempt to correct it. Mm-hmm. One of the...
So there's nothing to correct, is what you're saying.
Yeah, like, because I don't feel like it's like a flaw or something that I want to fix. Mm-hmm. Like you said.
Yeah.
I'd be able to get so much more, you know, I'd be able to focus. I think there are things that I like about myself because, like, of the asexuality. I am a really loyal person. Some of that has to do with, like, I'm very non-distracted by sex. I value my girlfriend for, oh my god, so many different things. And sex, I don't mean sex isn't one of them because I don't care about that part of our relationship. Because, like, no, like, I would be very upset. Also, like, another weird factor in the whole thing, like, I would be very upset if my girlfriend said, like, we're never having sex again. I wouldn't leave the relationship. I wouldn't leave it. I would say, okay, but I would be sad that, like, something was being lost from our relationship. And that's what I mean by it's not, I don't ever want to have sex again for the rest of my life. It's just, it's not this huge priority, and it's not something that I consistently, you know, focus on and want to do. We're connected in so many different ways. I don't know what it's like to have, like, a relationship because the sex is great, you know, and I've heard that. I've heard people say that, like, oh, I can't get rid of this relationship because the sex is so great. And I'm like, how the hell do you ignore all the other toxic shit that's going on because sex is that important? I like that I don't make stupid, ridiculous decisions because I'm distracted by sex.
No.
It's not shaming anybody. Like, I just like that about my life, and I like that about who I am as a person. It's kind of unfortunate that most of the conversations that I have, a lot of the relationships that I had in the past, I mean, it was treated like something was wrong with me. Yeah. When I think it's kind of like a perk. People are like, oh man, you're really missing out. Like, you just don't know how great, like, having, like, a great sex life. And I'm like, first of all, I do think that I have a great sex life.
Yeah.
Because I enjoy the sex that I do have, you know, and I love the person that I am in a relationship with. But no, I don't feel like I have no FOMO here. It sounds like that whole like sex, like raging sex life that you guys have is like pretty problematic. Like,
yeah, honestly, it seems
takes
like
up a lot
there's
of
a lot
time.
more up and downs. How many times do you think a person can fall in love in their life?
Oh my God, infinitely. I fall in love with people all the time, just like in a different category of my life. Like I'm crazy in love with some of my friends as my friends, like as being being in this area of my life that I'm in love with them being there, and I'm always going to be crazy in love with them as a part of my life.
Yeah.
But you know, with Shannon, what's different, and that's a hard thing to talk about when you're, again, on an asexual spectrum. What's the difference between being wildly in love with your girlfriend, but also, like, you know, being in love with your friends? Usually the definitive thing is what? Sex. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, oh, I have sex with this person. Mm-hmm. That's the definitive, I just think that's crazy. It shouldn't be that specific, right? Shannon, the difference is, like, I might be wildly in love with a friendship, but that friendship has its own place in my life. It might be the conversations that we have. It might be, like, you know, the things that we can talk about or the things that we can create together. I'm wildly in love with some people that I create with because I'm in love with creating with them. You know, those things are very specific. But I am in love with Shannon in a way that I want her involved in every single aspect of my life. All of it. Yeah. There's nothing that I don't want Shannon to be a part of. At the end of the day, like when I go home, like Shannon is home. She is the home, right? And nobody else gets to be in there. Like if anybody else is there, if anybody else is in the home, no, that's you know, that's not the home. It's just when her and I are alone together. And I don't need sex to be happening to feel that, you know? She is who I share the vulnerable space with. Like I know that Shannon could hurt me if she wanted to. I know that if she changed her mind and, like, didn't want to be with me, you know, tomorrow or whatever, those things happen, you know? Like, that would devastate me. And therefore, I live in vulnerability with Shannon. Like, I share that with her, right? That's the difference. Like, that's the separation. Like, we don't have to agree all the time. We don't have the same love language. We don't, like, live our life technically exactly the same. Like, we're so opposite in so many ways. You know, the reason I fell in love with Shannon, or the moment that I really fell in love with Shannon, from falling in love with her as a friend, because we were friends first, like falling in love with her as a friend and realizing I want this person in my life forever. We were going in different directions after, like, meeting up and hanging out, and then Shannon, you know, started walking in a different direction, and I was like, I feel like we should be going the same direction all of the time. Like, Shannon going in a direction away from me for any reason is devastating. It's heartbreaking. Like, that is how the separation of, like, romantic love happens to me. Like, she is connected to me in every way, versus the other people that, like, I'm in love with as friends, they're connected to me in, like, one or two ways, or, like, you know, this specific way. Like, Shannon is everything. She exists in every part of my life, and I want her to exist in every part of my life.
That was really sweet.
I love that.
And since I genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, mean it when I say, like, I fall in love with Shannon over and over and over and over. I fell in love with her yesterday because she was spray painting leaves on the porch. Because I just think that she's so cool. She really is so fucking cool. She's so cool. She's so creative. She's queer and strange and unique, and, like, she really pisses me off sometimes, I promise. Like, we're human, and, like, she makes me mad. But, like, Shannon is so cool, just, like, existing in the world, and the way she thinks about things, and, like, her humor, and, like, even when she's, like, thinking that she's embarrassing herself, like, I love...
She's such a fucking humble cool, too.
Oh my god, yeah, she totally is, and, like, I fall in love with Shannon doing little things all of the time. I fall in love with her when she's, like, making pancakes with our kids. I fall in love with her when she's spray painting leaves for a party. I fall in love with her when she's selling her jewelry, and I see, like, a line. In a monogamous relationship, I think that needs to be present, right? Like... Some people have open relationships. I could never do that, but I respect people that do, you know?
What are two things about yourself that you know and need no reinforcement?
I am loyal and I am honest.
That was easy.
Yeah.
Do you have, like, a moment that sticks out for you that is your most profound queer experience?
When we took the idea for the gray area to One Spark, the first 2 days, you know, we were just kind of pitching like crazy, and like we were, all over the place. We didn't really know. You want to fix it?
I got that.
Okay.
You can keep talking then.
We were just kind of pitching like crazy. We were all over the place. We didn't really know exactly, the film we were making, but we went there to just talk about, like, what if we made a film focused on, the masculine female perspective, and like what a day and that life and that lifestyle is like currently and previously, etc. And on the end of the second, I can't remember if it was the end of the second or like the beginning of the third day, I'm just not sure, but it went from like us pitching to 2 or 3 people to like the Mocha Theater was full. Oh, wow. And we were like, oh, it must be just a busy day at One Spark, And then when I got off the stage and I walked out of the theater, there was a line of women waiting to talk to me. And I was like, what is this? What is going on? Mm. And I started, of course in my head, I'm like, I'm going to talk to every single one of these women. And I started talking to these women from all different backgrounds, all different lifestyles, all different orientations. And over the next 3 days, like, it was just like that constantly. These women were just lining up. The theater was packed. Women were lining up to talk to me, ask me questions, tell me their story. And that was the first time in my entire life that I felt connected to other women as a whole. Wow. I had never felt like I was a part of the community of women as a whole, or like I don't know how you would say it, like the women as a gender, like that. Just, I always felt on the outside of that because of what was told to me growing up, because of how people reacted to me, because just of my appearance. I just felt so disconnected from that my entire life. And that, like, I remember just being, like, bewildered and, like, brain broken, and just, this is how I connect with being a woman. This is me connecting with women. Mm-hmm. And it was, like, a really strong moment for me in terms of identity. Mm-hmm. I'm not on the outside of this as much as I thought that I was. And that's so important. That was just a really important realization for me. The second most recent profound moment was the panel that we did for 5 Points Pride. We chose to discuss what inclusive really means, and like how we're defining that as a community, because we realize, like, all these different people have these different ideas on what being inclusive is. Mm-hmm. How do we be inclusive? Like, that. And so we set out to create this panel and not put people on it that were kind of the people who were always called upon in Jacksonville. Mm-hmm. We have a buddy system city, right? Oh, yeah. And a lot of that results in the same people. You're hearing from the same people all the time. Mm-hmm. We wanted to, like, kind of dig into the corners and say, like, where are the gay voices or the queer voices or the ally voices or whatever that people are not hearing from. Mm-hmm. And so we put together this panel, and it was so diverse and it was so awesome. And the profound experience was, we filled up the room. I think like 70 people came. And the people on the panel started disagreeing with each other, and then the people in the audience were disagreeing with each other, and there was this crazy, like, awesome, respectful dialogue that was going on, where people were saying stuff, and then half the room would be like, "Oh my God," and then, like, the other half would say something, and then that half would be like, "Oh God, like, you can't say that, you can't do that, you can't ask that," and it's like, yes, we can. There was this person sitting at the bar, and they said, "I didn't know that gay people disagreed with each other." That was a profound moment for me. And that was another time that I was like, I connected with queer people in this event that I love very much. I connected with them in a way that I feel really strong about, in a way that I had never connected with queer people before.